Welcome to the Amber Nectar podcast, discussing the things we think about Hull City AFC.
Welcome along to the Amber Nectar podcast on behalf of all three of us. First of all, we hope you had a great Christmas and we wish you a very happy and prosperous 2019. And we've not seen you for a little while. Quite a lot has happened in the last couple of weeks or so, and all of it good. So let's go through it. 1 defeat in 12, which includes also 8 wins and 3 draws, 27 points from the last 36, top of the form table in not just the Championship but English football as a whole, prior to Liverpool at Man City tomorrow at least. Bottom 3 at the beginning of December, now 13th. 3 points and a better goal difference off 7th, 7 points off the playoffs. As the Hull City Southern Supporters Twitter account put it yesterday, what the shitting crikey is going on? Would either of you guys like to answer that question? Because it's the most pertinent one I think I'm going to ask all evening.
Well, allow me to be the first to say it's probably down to Nigel Adkins, isn't it? I kicked the man when City appeared a little bit clueless and didn't have any understanding amongst themselves, and when they lacked confidence. But the very opposite is true at the moment. City are bristling with confidence. Saturday showed that well, where it wasn't enough for them to just take a 1-0 lead. At that point, they were like sharks sensing blood in the water and thought, let's have some Bolton bum fun. It was quite amazing. And that confidence, if I'm attributing lack of confidence earlier in the season down to the manager, must be attributed to the manager. So hurrah for Nigel Adkins. Doesn't mean I like the man from a personal point of view, and I find that if I don't listen to any of his pre or post match utterings, I'm far more tolerant of him. But well done, Nigel Adkins.
It's spot on, isn't it, really? We were critical of him earlier in the season, and that's a lot down to the fact that we were in the bottom 3. But how implausibly distant does that bottom 3 feel now? I saw this morning that City are as long as 100 to 1 to be relegated.
I think City are playing England in the Nations League now.
Well, I fancied that we'd probably win it at the moment. The way we're playing is, it's not as though we're grinding these results out, is it? We're actually playing some really, really attractive football to go with it. And to be on that run of form you highlight, Matt, and to be playing the way we're playing is, from a season that was shaping up to be one of the worst I could ever remember, has all of a sudden taken this peculiar turn, and I can't wait for the next game. I really can't.
We always say when we do these sort of roundup type podcasts over a holiday period where we've not talked for a little while to you, that we'll go through each game quite sort of briefly and summarise them and make it as reasonably a length of podcast as possible. I've got a feeling we could go on for quite a while tonight because all 4 games are worth talking about. Let's start chronologically. It's 4 games since we last spoke, 4 wins. First of all, we come back from behind in front of a television audience against Swansea.
Yeah, and we were getting a little bit of, well, not quite chasing, but we were second best in the first parts of that game. And it did seem for a while as though Swansea were going to get a second goal. And I think the fact that they didn't owed a little bit to fortune. But I think it also owed a little bit to the fact that City showed some resolve to stay in the game. There's not an awful lot you're ever going to do about a 2-goal deficit because it's always a long, long way back in a low-scoring sport. But we kept it to 1, and then we just had this ridiculous purple patch of 3 goals in 10 minutes. It wasn't even our most purple patch of the Christmas period, but it transformed the game so completely.
Purple,
I was going to say, you talk about a purple patch, but given what Swansea were wearing, more of an aubergine patch, wasn't it?
Well, they played like a bunch of aubergines, didn't they, when they were trying to mark up for our second goal? We were helped, weren't we? But at the same time, you've got to score 3 goals in 10 minutes and you absolutely deserve everything that comes your way.
And having the fortitude to carry on playing like that and looking individually at Jared Bowen when he'd missed that penalty as well.
Yeah, but you've got to do that, haven't you? When you're hot, and you've got to really make the most of that. And City were in a period of that game where they looked like they were going to score every single time they went forward. So why the hell would you sit back? There's time to sit back at other times, and when Swansea pulled the late one back, that was a pretty good time to dig in and not completely arse everything up, because I think that would have been a pretty deflating occurrence if we'd thrown away a 3-1 lead with 5 minutes left. But we dug in, we held out, and deserved the win.
Let's go to the most important part of that game, though, Les. What was the official shade, according to kit manufacturers, of that Swansea away kit?
I don't know about the actual manufacturer. I did wonder, but I'm going to go with irradiated Zinfandel.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Fortitude again, I like that word at the moment, and we showed it in a different way because we went behind also at Preston on Boxing Day. We were dragged back against Preston on Boxing Day and had the fortitude to get a winner in the last 10 minutes. Preston away on Boxing Day, when you're at 1-1 with 10 minutes to go, you think take the point, don't you? But City were having it. It was a bit of a scrambled winner from Jackson Irvine, of course, but they all go in, they all count, and City had another 3 points.
Well, you presume that's because there was a sense of injustice, like that ridiculous decision when Huntington, whatever it is, took away Irvine's leg and had the temerity to make the "I won the ball" gesture. He never got within 4 or 5 yards away. You know, the ball was being pushed ahead. It was a disgusting decision, and I loved Irvine's apoplexy about it. And I also loved Henriksen ranting at the ref. Now, it's not often I say that. It's not often I will say I take enjoyment in a player being awkward to the ref. But that was such a shocking refereeing decision. And so that's why City sort of went for it at the end. That's why they thought, no, 1-1 isn't enough. We feel hardly done to here. And the first goal Irvine scored with his head was beautiful, wasn't it? I mean, everything about that was brilliant.
It was a lovely goal, wasn't it? Lovely team goal.
Yeah, Grzycki's through ball, Kingsley's cross, Irvine's header. It was beautiful. Whereas everything the last goal was nothing like that, was it? You know, it was a corner, there was a scramble, and he bundled it in, and it was just that righteous determination that you're not going to take a win that we deserve off us, and that was just beautiful.
It's good though that City are burgling those kind of goals at the moment, because we got an equaliser at Millwall from a similar sort of goal, from the kind of set-piece scramble that just wasn't falling our way 3 months ago. And not every single goal can be a work of art. You've got to score the ugly ones because the good teams are going to score, and you've got to make sure you do that. So I don't know if it's a flash in the pan or not, but I do like the fact that City have got some points on the board lately from that kind of goal.
And then we go to the game that all of us are, I don't know whether we'd written it off, but certainly thought, well, this is going to be the toughest assignment of our festive programme. But having got these 2 wins in quick succession against Swansea and Preston, we could at least go to Leeds with a bit of heart, a bit of good cheer and a bit of hope. I don't think we thought for a moment that we would go to the league leaders, of course, the champions of Europe, let's not forget, who had just won their previous 2 games with injury time winners, both from behind as well. And actually end up with a 2-0 victory, keeping a clean sheet, and really, really annoying their fans with our celebrations in the process.
Brilliant. I'm a big fan of annoying Leeds fans, and then annoying footballing knobheads up and down the country. I think that's a good thing. I can't say when I saw Will Keane lining up front, my assumption was a 2-0 victory. And bearing in mind at this point, Elphick had been withdrawn and Campbell was unavailable. So coming up against the top team in the division, regardless of who it is, that's away from home. That's a bit of a scary prospect. But what I did like was we got a tweet from Kitman John Eyre that had said he was dressing us in black to try and channel the 3-2 victory in 2012 with Big Abdi Fai Hulk smashing goals in, and that certainly worked very well. Leeds seemed afraid of Grzycki, didn't they? They were genuinely sort of like, what do we do with this? Because that one, where it was for the second goal, wasn't it? Where Grzycki just sort of like ghosted past 2 players.
He made them look ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, he just like, what were they doing? You thought, has that footage been spliced in with something? Because he just left them for dead.
When you've got a player like that who can do that sort of lovely sort of feint and body swerve, and the hips go one way and the legs go the other, and the defender has absolutely no idea genuinely at that point which direction the man and the ball are going to go in. When you've got a player who can do that sort of movement, and don't forget, when they're doing that movement, that's just rhythmical, that's just gymnastics. They're not actually touching the ball, they're not taking the ball with them, they're doing this movement with the hips and with the waist and the legs in order to fool the defender before then carrying on. Yeah, in order to then carry on with the ball and beat the defender. I mean, Grzycki's approach play for Bowen's second goal was gorgeous, wasn't it? It was absolutely perfect. It was beautiful to watch.
It really
I love
was.
it.
More superlatives, please.
And it had an end product, didn't it? And that's what we've called him out on so often, is the fact that he does something attractive and then the other team line up for a goal kick that they've just won. Whereas the big difference now seems to be that he's getting a bit of end product there, and that's only ever been the problem with him, with that and his attitude. But in terms of his play, he needs to make that into a good cross after doing that hip shuffle. So that's happening, and when you see him do that, you think that's a Premier League footballer, isn't it? And even though Leeds are borderline a Premier League team, nothing they could do about it. They even the manager talked, didn't he, afterwards, about the fact that he was engaging in some double marking. Well, he should treble mark, shouldn't he? Because those two wide players have gone to the best team in the division and shown them up, and it's not something that you would have expected, is it? I think on the morning of the match, I remember having a flicker of optimism that we could get something, maybe. When I heard that Elphick and Campbell were out and that Evan had obviously already gone, then you just assume that maybe a creditable defeat will be not the end of the world. It'll be galling to listen to all them Wesley gobshites go on about it, but we'll live with that given what's gone before. But to put that kind of performance in with three of your most important players not in the team, I just don't think he could have seen it, and it reflects enormous credit upon the other players and the manager who made it happen.
And we've got to talk about the defence at this point as well, because unlike against lesser sides, allegedly, in Swansea and in Preston, City went to Elland Road and kept a clean sheet.
Yeah, although Elphick isn't there anymore, I think his influence on Burke remains. I think that might be his legacy. Burke is a better player for having played with Elphick, I think, because Elphick was the demonstrable, finger-pointing, do this, and when you've done it well, I'll come and stick my shoulder in your gut and then hip toss you and maybe put you in a Boston crab. But I just think...
I didn't understand a word of that.
Oh, and I did mean Gene Okerlund died as well. So insensitive.
I still don't understand.
Rip Mean Gene. I just think he's had a great impact on Burke, and Burke has looked phenomenally confident in the last two games. On Saturday, he was just taking the ball forward for a wonder, wasn't he? But defensively, he's doing really well. You can't throw anything but plaudits at Bowen. It's not just his willingness to run at opposition teams when he's got the ball, it's his ability to just react quickly as well. That first goal was just all about just quick reactions and putting a foot in there to sort of clip the ball in. And just going back to Grzycki a little bit, one of the viewers said, he's playing for a move. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt he's playing for a move. He does have an uncanny knack of playing well when the transfer window is been washed, ready for being prized open. But the difference at the moment is he doesn't look like he's playing for himself. He looks like he's playing for his teammates. So he's putting in beautiful balls for them. He's putting in great crosses for them. He's been involved in every goal, even if it isn't him scoring them. And that, I think, is the difference. Because if he was just playing for himself, he could just run down the wing as fast as he likes. He could just do that all the day, and famously give the ball away, as the song doesn't say that he does. But he does seem to be part of the team spirit, and you notice when the players are celebrating and when they're coming and congratulating each other after the game. Grzycki is a part of that, so he's a part of the team spirit rather than he's thinking, well, I'm not going to get psychologically involved because I'm off soon. That doesn't appear to be happening. I should be irritated by this thing where he keeps bringing his kids on the pitch at the end of the game, but strangely I'm not, because if that's him showing, well, for the time being at least I'm committed to the club, then fair enough. Because when he is committed to the club and when he's playing for the team rather than just for himself, City can benefit. And look at it at the moment as we're just amassing 3 points here, there, and everywhere.
Les just loves everybody and everything at the moment. This is...
Well,
we've known you a long time. This is unusual. Even when City have been in higher echelons than they are at the moment in the table of... No, well, we'll certainly have an opportunity for you to denounce and scorn Ehab Allen a little bit later on in the podcast. Mauled by the Tigers got an airing, and that doesn't happen very often. I know that a lot of Leeds fans were pissed off by it, which means we need to do it more often, and certainly against Leeds. The incentive to do it more often by City getting reasonable enough score lines to make it worthwhile, because that's the point, you see. I remember years and years ago, I can't remember which game it was, somebody trying to do a Mauled by the Tigers chant when we were only a goal up. And you can't do that. You have to be at least 2 goals up and feel like you've got an element of surety.
Is that the definition of maul? 2 goals.
Entirely possible.
Yeah.
I have an element of sort of surety about your the scoreline and about your safety with that scoreline. Bearing in mind as well, of course, that 2-0 up at Leeds doesn't mean that Leeds aren't still going to win. You know, they won 2 games before that, 3-2 with last-minute injury time winners. But anyway, I love the fact that Mauled by the Tigers got an airing, because we've had little cause in recent years to actually do it, and I love the fact that it annoyed so many people who you enjoy annoying.
It's annoyed all the West people, hasn't it, which is nearly Leeds United fans, and the kind of cretins who write for something called Football Joe, or self-righteous, sanctimonious dicks who just sit behind the computer screen.
They're Liverpool fans with Cockney accents, I find.
No, I don't know. These people who responded to it, they all appear to be like fans of sort of like Forest, clubs who... These championship clubs who think they're better than everyone else because of things that they did 20 years before they were born. And I think it's...
Having said that, I did enjoy pointing out that yesterday... was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, Leeds, the supposed fake champions of Europe, were actually playing Nottingham Forest, who were twice the genuine champions of Europe.
Yeah,
and it's never a bad thing to point that out.
What's amusing about this, this Joe, the way they were writing it, there was another one as well where there was a picture and it says, "This is how all City fans think they look," and it was a picture of an actual tiger. And it's like, do you actually think we're doing it seriously? Do you actually think we're not self-aware? And that this isn't about irony, and we're not being deliberately camp, because we're taking the piss. And I just think it sort of hints at the current state of fandom, where it's so joyless. Where you can't look at that and see the amusingness in it. Whereas, when we did it, it's not even a new thing, is it?
We did it
2 decades ago. Yeah. We did it at Arsenal a decade ago.
We started doing it after the club shop started doing T-shirts with the word "mauled" as a motif on them.
Long before that.
Really?
I think the T-shirts were in response to the sort of the chant.
I think it's always been a reaction to us being mocked with the Tigers, rah thing, which is 40 years old, I would have thought. So, this chant very likely predates even all of us, and the idea that it's some recent thing we've dreamed up just purely for Leeds, and we think we're doing it seriously, and we look like actual genuine Tigers while we're doing it.
It's great, isn't it?
You have to be an imbecile of scarcely credible proportions.
Or
to
a Leeds fan.
Or a Leeds fan, or the kind of dick who, just as Les says, has got no joy in it. Look,
the two are not exactly indistinguishable.
How karma poking were Bolton? They sort of mocked us with it at the start of the game. They laughed at us because we, in the North Stand, cheered what looked like Grzycki's goal going in. Well, they suddenly felt silly after that, because practically every shot after that went in, and they genuinely did get mauled. And if mauled is 2 goals, it was a maul 2.5.
Somebody on Periscope has just said it was used when City beat Palace in the League Cup, Steve Wilson game.
I can't say I remember it, but it wouldn't surprise me.
No, it wouldn't surprise me. So that's 1997.
Yeah. It's an old chant. It's not something that's been new by the modern version of football fans.
When you look back, though,
for ages.
I mean, the most famous time we used it was when we beat Arsenal, and when you look back, that was a really brave thing to do, because we were only 2-1 up at the time that we did it.
That proves it's self-mockery, doesn't it? Because we weren't mauling Arsenal at all. We were grimly holding on for a shock 2-1 victory. They weren't getting mauled, were they? But we said it anyway, because we know it's not fucking serious.
And also, I mean, you've got to bear in mind that we did it in the Premier League during that first season, the season we've been talking about of a decade ago, because we were beating sides, and beating them in some cases quite comfortably, sides that we had absolutely no prospect of beating according to the paper and the bookies. And teams like Forest and Leeds were nowhere near the Premier League, and actually haven't been near the Premier League in all of that period. So that they probably wouldn't have noticed it at the time, because they wouldn't have been watching Match of the Day. They would have been waiting for Manish and Steve Claridge with the Football League highlights immediately afterwards. But Bolton fans probably should have known better, because they were in the Premier League 10 years ago, although admittedly we didn't actually get to a stage where we could sing Mauled by the Tigers at them.
Football fandom has become joyless, isn't it? The most witty chant you get now is, "You live in a shithole, this is a shithole, I want to go home, shithole, shithole, shithole."
Well, that's it.
Everything is just like that now, and it's drab, and something happens where it's self-depreciatory and it's a bit of fun, and suddenly we're all a bunch of nonsense. What's gone on with the game?
It's insane.
Brexit, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's almost entirely it. It's the influence of Donald Trump. It's ours as well. I mean, that's the thing. It's something that we have that nobody else can have. All football fans, whoever they support, chant roughly the same chants to roughly the same tunes. But you get the odd bit of fan culture, whether it's a song or an action, that's yours, and this one's ours, even though we don't get to use it very often. You look at Delilah by Stoke, for example. Nobody else sings Delilah. Now, whatever you think of that, that's theirs. And Man City nicking the Poznan a few years ago from German football, wasn't it?
Polish.
You know, was it Polish football?
Poznan.
Okay, well, all right, whatever. I was going to make the point that a German side were using it as well, and I think that's where Man City fans who started doing it saw it happen. But you can be as pedantic as you wish.
Oh yeah, can I?
Well,
you know, I mean, there was a time when football chanting was a little bit fun. Look where Crystal Palace got the nickname from. Brighton took the nickname from. They went the Seagulls before. Something like 30 years ago, and they went to Crystal Palace and they were going Eagles, 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 and somebody thought, wouldn't it be funny if we chanted Seagulls, Seagulls, Seagulls back to them? And that became the official nickname.
That goes back to the early 70s.
But now it's like a criminal offence because we sing a self-depreciatory song while we're taking the piss out of the opposition. Why isn't the Football League rejoicing that we've beaten Leeds in their own manner? Yeah. Rather than mocking our songs. And
it didn't bother putting any of the games on the red button on Sky as well over that period, despite our amazing run of form. And to bring it all up to date, Andy, and look at the performance against Bolton on New Year's Day. I mean, the fact that City, after about an hour of the game, could start singing "Mauled by the Tigers" and have the confidence to keep singing it for literally the rest of the game, shows, first of all, what a phenomenal performance it was in its own right, irrespective of the form going into it. But also the craptitude of Bolton Wanderers.
Yeah, they were pretty dog-tod, weren't they? The substitution they made at half-time is what Phil Parkinson has suggested completely did for them, in that they took off a holding midfielder and put on a more attacking midfielder. But I don't think one single substitution can really explain what happened. They were terrible, but City stepped it up, and when they scored the second goal, what I loved is that they kept wanting to score more goals. I absolutely love that about any City side that's ever had that attitude, because it's what you pay your money for, isn't it? There's a temptation to think 2-0, brilliant, job done, let's take it easy because this lot are awful and they're not coming back. But we kept pouring forward. It was like an amber wave, wasn't it? It was so good to watch that determination to score more. And you look at the fact that Martin and Dicko scored, it was a real sort of party of goal scoring at the end, wasn't it? With everyone getting involved.
Seriously, you want to talk about more by the Tigers? Chris Martin scoring against you, that's taking the piss. Truly. I mean,
it was a good finish.
I say that vaguely respectfully, because he had a poor start to the game, but actually was fairly decent after that, because City started... I thought it was a very low-quality first half, and I don't think either side was particularly good. City looked like they were the better team and had gears to go up. Bolton didn't. They looked like a team of Amiobis, didn't he, with his Carlton Palmer-esque gait. They were just Bolton as a whole were just a deeply ungainly entity. But City were deservedly in front without being excellent. But I love the fact that we just said, well, now we're going to be. And there was points in that game where you're just laughing. When Chris Martin's scoring a fourth, you're laughing, aren't you? When Dicko comes off the bench, Mr. Lone Furrow Plower himself, and nods in, you're laughing. And
you're laughing.
That kind of joy we haven't seen at a City game in God knows how long.
I'll tell you when else we're laughing. When the game is 6-0 and only 1 minute of added time is put on the end. I mean, are you supposed to add 30 seconds for every goal because of the celebrations for a start? Plus, there will have been numerous substitutions.
I think it was like a Mercy situation. Cause
do you think the referee was on a meter?
I think Phil Parkinson's got Hull PTSD, and I think maybe it was done for his benefit. Let's end the game before he ends his life.
Yeah, that 1 minute of injury time was one of the oddest things I think I've ever seen. A football match. 1 minute. There were 5 goals and 4 or 5.
City could have scored 2 goals in that minute. Given what was
I really wanted another
62nd
goal.
and 63rd. That implausible scoring of 2 goals within a nanosecond, within a plank time.
It was the ultimate in greedy bastardry, wasn't it? To want more than 6, because we scored 6 with recent vintage against Fulham in the Premier League. But when was the last time we got 7? Was it the game against Swansea under Haitley? Not including, and even then, before that, the 8 against Whitby in the FA Cup. To score 7 in a match at that level of of the game would have been fantastic. So yeah, City, you shit.
Yeah, it could have been anything, couldn't it? I wonder if City did finally relax with a few minutes left, but that's absolutely understandable. They've played a lot of games as well, and I wonder if that contributed to the stodgy first half. The Christmas is a busy period, and I can't imagine that Bolton have got a particularly deep squad. We know we don't. So maybe that contributed to it. And of course, when you start scoring a couple in the second half, you feel as though you could run forever, and that was great, wasn't it?
There was a point earlier in the season where if we'd have lost a key component of the squad, we were doomed. You know, we weren't going to do anything in the next game. But you look what we've done without. You know, Elphick gone. That's a big blow. Doesn't feel it at the moment. I think that's something that we'll feel that as a bit of a delayed effect. But, you know, not having Campbell available, Irvine being on international duty, I think any one of those would have crippled us in the first third of the season, and suddenly we're not breaking stride despite, you know, having like 3 of those missing in one. That's incredible, and that's down to confidence.
I think I just want to show a bit of love for Stuart, who, when the match was a bit stodgy in the first half, was the one at least making sure that we were winning the arm wrestle. But I thought he was really actually very good. I don't know if he's quite the player I thought he was going to be. But I thought we were signing a more skillful player. Although I do remember that Klopp lauded his tackling ability, but he's turned into that really effective, ugly kind of midfielder in the last couple of weeks. Maybe he's done it all the time, and I've never appreciated it. Yeah, I have actually spent time just watching him and him alone and seeing what he's up to, because I'd never.
Is that just on a football
purely
pitch?
On the football pitch? I don't really,
I'm not on Waitrose.
No, Waitrose.
Oh, he's buying Nivea.
Far more sinister a thought than Waitrose going on, but. It's the sort of thing he would have done to Justin Whittle 20 years ago.
What do you mean? I think I've stopped.
He's moved house just so that he'd have his post delivered by Justin Whittle.
Well, I haven't worked. Object. No,
I'm talking about Stuart, because I just want to, let's just round that up, because let's talk about big performances from individuals in general. Because although it's been obviously a phenomenal sort of team ethic that's got City this amazing array and sequence of results, there are individual performances that stand out, and more so over this period where teams are constantly being changed because there's a lot of games in quick succession. Players get injured, players get tired, and we haven't got a big squad, but Adkins has managed to sort of shuffle the pack accordingly and wisely. You've talked about Stuart. I was going to bring him up, but you've mentioned him anyway. But looking at Jared Bowen for a moment, he got 2 against Swansea, plus he missed the penalty. He scored 2 more against Leeds. He got another one in the 6-0 against Bolton. He's got 10 goals now this season, having got 14 last season. And the club, I don't know whether it is the club or just the manager, whether the manager has got the authority to say this from the club. Let's remember who the authority is at the club and who represents authority at the club. But they've already said Jared Bowen is not for sale. Now, it's not exactly a common thing for Hull City authority and hierarchy to go back on their word when they make pronounced statements like that. But assuming we can take them at their word, or want to take them at their word, do we see Jared Bowen staying at the club in January?
I see Jared Bowen himself staying. I don't see necessarily any desire to move on. I think he's a player who knows bigger things may come to him, but I don't think they necessarily need to happen immediately. I don't think they need to happen in this transfer window. And you know what? I can almost understand the owners of the club not wanting to sell him at this point. If they're genuinely truthful about wanting out and wanting to sell the club, then a bit of round of asset stripping in January isn't going to help that, is it? No. You know, if you're asking for 40 million for a club that's patently not worth it, for a club that doesn't have its own academy, you know, that it doesn't own its own stadium, as a pitch and a half for a training ground. How can you do that and then rob a club of that just for like a short-term fix of money?
But this is where you have to ask the question whether the owners genuinely are, like we've always asked it before, wanting to sell the club.
I don't know. We'll see.
Somebody's just said on Periscope, Bowen's bound to go because he wants another yacht.
Yeah, well, that's always a possibility. It's a possibility.
It's a depressing possibility.
Can I just ask you, Andy, what was your favourite goal on Saturday?
It wasn't Saturday, yesterday. From Bolton.
Yesterday, yeah. It's the midweek day. I don't know what day it is anymore.
It's the sumptuous passing move. I think I'm always a sucker for a passing move that culminates. You can point to Grzycki's individual goal, cutting in off the wing and flaying it in the bottom corner. I think it's the fourth goal where pass, low shot.
So really Chris Martin's goal against Bolton is your favourite goal of is that your favourite goal of the season?
We live in unusual times.
We certainly do.
The ball played to Martin by Terral isn't a ball many players would have made. I think they would have been tempted to try and shovel the ball past the keeper themselves in that position. I love John Terral. I think he's the most technically gifted player at the club, and I'm delighted to see him back in the team. And I look at that goal, nice tidy finish, because Martin did. What in basketball they call a no-look pass, or in the NFL they talk about a quarterback looking off a player, making the defence think you're going to go one way. He looked one way and struck it the other way. Incredible technique for a player who our friend JR described as chugging about for most of the game. My favourite goal was Ivandro's. There was some neat interplay by City on the wing. But I love that Ivandro sort of pointed where he wanted the ball from Grzycki. But he sort of did, it wasn't quite a single move, but it was almost a single move where he killed it dead and then sort of dug the shot out. And you didn't look at it as if he was going to get that much power on the shot. But I thought that was an absolute sublime finish. And we're talking about individuals. Ivandro is another one where he might not be capable of playing week in, week out at this point, but he's got a real sparkle to him, hasn't he? When City are playing with confidence, you just think, yeah, can we have some of that, please?
Do we need another centre back? I know that we've lost Elphick, but when you've got players like McDonald and Mazout still to come back, do we still need another centre back?
I think we possibly do, because I don't think McDonald's back till March, and that's a while to go back.
And I don't think you can rely on Mazout, can you?
You probably can't rely on either much for the rest of the season, because McDonald's going to take a while to get up to fitness as well, and depending on what we're wanting to do this season. But I think, we could do with another one, couldn't we?
One departure that does look likely is Will Keane. Ipswich have come in for him, and the club apparently have told Will Keane that he can leave. We are, I wouldn't say blessed is the right word necessarily, but we do have enough centre forwards and ones who tend to score goals as well, which I always find handy especially when you're only playing in a 4-5-1 and you're required to do all the running and all the scoring pretty much by yourself. But facetiousness aside, that's a little bit of money that will come in. I suppose the question mark is how much money of anything that we sell is Nigel Adkins going to get?
I don't think it's going to be much money. If his contract is up at the end of the season,
it'll be a peppercorn 5-figure amount, but you never know what else it's going to add on to.
Maybe. Adkins have just never really fancied Will Keane, has he? I don't mean as in, he's gorgeous. Although, he did give us the only time in City's history where we had 2 man buns on the pitch. I guess that balmy, not really balmy, but that night in Burton, I guess. So if just not wait for him, it's a bit of a shame, really.
It's quiet on Grzycki because he is out of contract at the end of the season, and it's not as if he's not renowned for sort of showing himself when it comes to transfer windows about his availability. And notwithstanding the comments that you quite rightly make about Grzycki looking like a performer for the team, rather. Is he out of the contract in the summer?
I'm not sure.
I think he was a player that was up till 2020. I almost think that's one of the reasons why the Allams wanted rid of him, because he had such a long contract. And it was so unusual for the Allams to sign such a long contract at that period. It was the silver period, wasn't it, where City was sort of taking punts on players on loan. Short-term deals. So him getting like a 5-year deal or whatever it is ridiculous. I'm not convinced his deal's up at the end of the season. Well,
irrespective of when his deal's up, it's quiet on Grzycki, isn't it? And he's been the player that we've talked about the most in recent transfer windows, especially when we've been clearly on the way. Not necessarily down in terms of divisions, but certainly downwards in terms of our spiral in the fabric of English football. And Grzycki always, when he chooses to play and play well, as until recent times when the whole team has played well, looked like a fish out of water for being too damn good. And you do wonder when he's going to go. But now maybe it's gone quiet on Grzycki because everybody else has risen to that perceived Grzycki level.
The Grzycki scale, I like it. But he's also not done himself favours, has he? I mean, look at the last transfer window when he was, drinking Turkish tea on Instagram, and then when the Turkish club, who he says he's done a deal with, think, right, let's get him in to sign the contract, they can't find him at the hotel. That must have an impact in the game where they just think, okay, even if this guy's talented, you can't even find him when it's coming up to the end of deadline day. What's the point? You do wonder if the penny has dropped with him. I think he's a bit dim. I think he's got a bit of a mendacious agent who he's paid a lot of attention to, and said, "Oh, I'll attract your attention. I'll get you. I'll put you in front of clubs." But it's not really done him any favours, has he? And you just wonder with this current run of form. It's the unselfishness of it that grabs me. Has something finally clicked for Gwizicki? That sort of thing. I need to keep grafting with it. Even if I'm not going to move. In January.
2020 apparently is when his contract runs out. So he's got 18 months to go. So there's no immediate pressure on City to sell him. But obviously, that as if City under the current regime have not sold players in the past when they've not been under too much pressure to do so. So we'll see what happens. Of course, January's transfer window's just started. Looks like Will Keane's going to Ipswich. We'll see what happens with arrivals, if any. Nigel Adkins has said he wants to do business, but he's going to say that. Let's see whether he actually gets the opportunity to bring some players in. Just for bodies, really, isn't it? We need bodies in the squad. Obviously we want good players, and they've got to be the right players that fit in with the tactics and the fabric and the team spirit. But we do need numbers, don't we?
Yeah, we're pretty light, aren't we? And that's it's not going to be helped if we start winning a couple of games in the cup either, is it? And although I imagine that we're not in any... Not got much chance of swapping divisions now this season, have we? And that's actually a good thing compared to where we were. But you still want to see us progress. It would be a shame for this all to get frittered away by a lack of squad depth. And if we can bring a couple of players in, I'm certainly not suggesting we can continue this form because that's surely unsustainable. But it'd be great to just get a nice, safe mid-table kind of position. It's so much better than grimly fighting for your life all season. We'd like to see a few more wins and a few more goals. And I think you're right, man. I think we need a couple more bodies for that, just to give us that depth of squad. Because we're still only a couple of injuries away. Granted, we've coped very well with 3 recent losses, but we aren't far off. Okay,
I want to ask you two a question. We've just played Phil Parkinson's Bolton Wanderers. Phil Parkinson was our manager for the first 4 or 5 months of the 06-07 season, as we all recall too well. Can you remember who won the championship that season? We stayed up with a game to go. We won at Cardiff, of course, and sent Leeds down. But who won the championship title? Can you remember? Either of you? I'm going to keep talking for the benefit of our YouTube and Periscope audience while the blank looks from these two mean awkward silences. Doesn't sound good on a podcast to have long periods of silence. Any thoughts?
Wasn't Norwich, was it?
Wasn't Norwich. Les? Well, let me tell you, Les's silence speaks volumes. It's very rare we get Les silence speaking volumes, but on this occasion. Well, let me tell you, because at the beginning of January, where we are now, this particular team were 10th. Okay? A month before, December 14th. November, they were 15th on the first day of each of these months. October 14th. And September, 1st of September, which was around the time they hired the manager, they were second bottom. They finished top of the table, having lost only once in the calendar year of 2007. It was Sunderland, managed by Roy Keane.
Paris Saint-Germain.
Managed by Roy Keane. Now, let me tell you where they were at this point of the season. As I said, 1st of January, 2007. They were 10th. 27 games played. They'd won 12, lost 11, 40 points. There were 13 points off the top, and they were only 3 points off the playoffs. It was a very tight division. Now, people are talking about Hull City's ambitions for this season. The point is, we're only 7 points off the playoffs, and we're 15 points off the top. Roy Keane's Sunderland lost only the penultimate game of that calendar year, January through to May. Now, do you think it's possible that City can put on a run that, at the very least, will get them into the top 6 by the end of the season? Or are we thinking too far ahead now? The only reason I brought all that up is because I've quoted an example where it can happen.
Well, it can happen. And we know from 2007, 2008, we went stellar for much of that opening campaign. And then we turned up, and it's incredible, looking at this, what you can do in a single month, putting a few results together, suddenly within touching distance of the playoffs.
I suppose the point I'm making, Les, before you go any further, is that in 2007, 2008, we were always mid-table up to New Year's Day and then started to climb. Through to the end of September, beginning of October, Sunderland were in the bottom 6.
But they had a fairly deep... Did they have like Dwight York playing for them that season? They still had a squad that could cope with the demands of a promotion charge. I'm not sure City have. I'm enjoying what's going on at that City at the moment, and it's enjoyable. But I'm not going to be annoyed if it fizzles out, because I think there's a likelihood it will. there's almost a sense that City are playing on some kind of mad adrenaline at the moment. And I don't know how sustainable it is, and I'm not going to be irritated in the slightest if the sort of bubble bursts. And
it goes without saying, it depends on whether we've still got the players that we've got now come the end of this transfer window. But we are much closer to the top 6 and to the top of the table at the moment in 13th place, points-wise, than we are to the bottom 3.
I take your point, but I do just feel that Sunderland were a little bit more equipped to be dealing with, challenging for playing in the Premier League than I think City are at the moment, regardless of Ehab's bizarre economic scale where he thinks paying this amount of money equals this league position. We all know that that's not how football works, is it?
It's not to say, though, that now that we're in 13th and looking relatively safe for the remainder of the season, that we have achieved the peak of our ambitions for this season.
I wonder if we have. I wonder if... a top half finish would be great, and I think... I say it a lot, but I'm convinced it's true. If you finish in the top half, it's so much better than having just narrowly survived, because you're so much more attractive to everything, really. It's easier to get fans in the next season. It's easier to get players in if you're only one stride away from the top 6, and so on and so forth. Who knows? The one way in which I can see that it could just about conceivably happen that we pinch 6th is if everyone stays fit, Irvine comes back fit, Campbell's not out for long, we get Elphick or another similar kind of player, and Bowen and Grosicki both remain fit and both keep playing like this. And there's an awful lot of ifs in there. Now, they could all... The stars could align and City could go on the kind of run that we're still talking about in 50 years' time. There's a lot needs to fall our way.
New Year's Day is always a good day to have a look at where you are, because everybody's played the same number of games, and you can see from the very top and the very bottom of the division that the wheat and the chaff are starting to become much more obvious. But there's always a team around the 10th to the 16th mark.
You think it's possible, don't you, Matt?
I think it's... I don't know about possible. I think it's not beyond our ambitions. I don't think we would be being unduly optimistic to say we could do it, but things have got to go our way. It's the point I'm making about the Sunderland thing, and actually you had a reasonable point there about City 10 years ago as well, is that it's not as if it hasn't happened before, and somebody will do it. I'm pretty certain that top 6, there's 4 points between Derby and Forest in 6th and 7th, but somebody between Forest and, let's say, Stoke will climb into the playoffs or very close to them before the end of the season. And somebody in that top 6, hopefully Leeds, will fall out of it during that period as well.
Absolutely. So I think what we're saying is, if you've booked any holidays in May, unbook them now, you imbeciles. You feckless dregs.
In the next game, we play Sheffield Wednesday in our next league game, and with 2 other results going our way, we'll be in 10th.
We will, and if we can get a couple more wins before the end of the transfer window, then that might ever so slightly change the calculations of the Allens, because they might think that £1 million or £2 might actually be worth just a punt on.
That worries me, because can you imagine what would happen if suddenly the club had another 4 years of Premier League money coming in? I think that could potentially be disastrous. This is an awful topic you've got on us with your perilous optimism.
Imagine the takeover not going through and City having the temerity to get promoted to the Premier League, and the Allens have pound signs in their eyes all over again. There's another yacht.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's not something I'd really thought of. I was busy.
Nigel Adkins, Premier League manager.
I was celebrating being 21 points above Ipswich without you dangling the Premier League carrot before us all. It is possible. I'll accede. It is possible.
It's not about the Premier League, though. I know I get stick for this, but I'm one of those people who doesn't. I like the fact that City are there because it's part of the elite and it means that they've got money coming into the club. But a lot of the Premier League is hard to like because you're getting absolutely rogered every single week. The glory of going up from the Championship, though, when you don't think about the Premier League afterwards, is a beautiful thing. When we had Brian Hughes on in the summer, talking about 10 years since the playoff victory, you guys were both on about Wembley that day rather than promotion to the Premier League afterwards. Yeah. It was an afterthought. And even now, we've had 3 promotions from the Championship now. Even now, the promotion from the Championship, that particular slice of glory is a lovely thing. And you don't really want to think about the Premier League too much, certainly not at that point. You want to think about it afterwards.
I think we all agree that the journey's better than the destination. I think that's been the case on all of our 3 promotions. But, okay, Matt, you said that New Year's Day is a good time to take stock. And yeah, it's a natural point of the season. We've obviously got a couple of weeks off because of the Cup as well now. Where Where do you think City are going to finish, all of us? What's your hunch at the moment?
Are we all going to put this down?
Yeah, come on.
And then
come on.
and then come back to bite us on the collective arse in May.
Yeah, because that's what we do. We talk shit and then we end up being wrong. So
I'm only putting the idea in your heads. I don't
I
necessarily think it's going to happen.
I want to lead position that.
Right.
I don't want a politician's answer. Come on, numbers.
9th.
Bloody hell.
Les?
15th.
I was going to say 15th. Now I'm going to look
Oh,
like
be more optimistic than 15th, Andy. Come on, we're in 13th now.
I think it's realistic. City are on an amazing run that can't continue ad infinitum.
Realism and pessimism don't necessarily go hand in hand, though.
I'm not being a pessimist. I don't think I'm being a pessimist.
15th,
I actually think 15th is brilliant because I was expecting nothing but for relegation to grab us by the lapels and to forcibly headbutt us into League One. So I'm delighted we're not there. I also think 15th in the Championship is tempting enough for somebody to buy the club and think, I can take this club to the Premier League in a couple of years. I don't think I'm being pessimistic.
But you use the contrast of 10 years ago when we had a far nicer ownership. We did have a better squad. We had a more proven. Well, no, we didn't have a more proven manager. That's not fair. But we had a manager who had said and done all the right things up to that point. And it was New Year's Day that season 10 years ago when we drew 1-1 at Stoke that I said we can make the playoffs. I didn't necessarily think that we would win them. So we made the contrast with 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, I think we had more going for us. The only thing we've got going for us now, in comparison with 10 years ago, I would say, is that we've got experience of going through it before.
Well, 10 years ago, I assumed that City weren't even allowed to get promoted to the Premier League. So.
But you weren't thinking about the Premier League, it was the playoffs and it was Wembley.
Well, I'm thinking about that because I assumed that there was also an ancient bylaw forbidding, the one about shooting a Welshman with a bow and arrow in Chester or something.
And if
like
you
that.
join the House of Lords, you're allowed to ferry a sheep down Whitehall and things.
The deeds of my house say I'm not allowed to rent the garden to gypsies. Am I going to pay the mortgage off now?
That's a bit racist.
It's the first thing he was going to do as well when he moved in.
So 9th, 15th and 15th.
Are you going for 15th as well? Like a big fat copycat? You are?
15th with this side. Okay, forget the last few weeks. Look at the season as a whole. It's been...
No, we can't forget about the last few weeks. We're basing our prediction. I'm basing my prediction on the last few weeks.
Well, I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'd look at it as the season as a whole.
And you're not me.
Well, I'm not.
Well, let's get the Periscope people to just put up their...
The
Periscope people.
Didn't they bat Yaz?
Let's get
everyone.
our viewers on Periscope, while we talk about the FA Cup tie this weekend, to put up their genuine predictions for where City are going to finish. Look, the Tiger Chat mailing list with some very, very ancient sages of Hull City, like Mike Scott and Ed Bacon and Mark Graham, have been putting comparisons up with 10 years ago, and we all know what happened 10 years ago.
Well, I think that might be a bit of mauled by the Tigers style giddiness and excitement in the heat of the moment.
Well, there's a lot of teenage positions.
18th?
11th, 7th, 12th, 10th, 15th. Everyone's just putting up random numbers now. There'll be a 28th in a minute.
I thought City were going to finish 28th in October.
6 beaten by Leeds in the playoffs. That's
There's a lot of people that believe we can finish 6th.
There's a lot of people going for single figure. I said 9th, and that's the lowest single figure, obviously. And a lot of people are going for the single figure finish, even if it's not necessarily in the top 6.
Well, I'll tell you what. Then why don't we all just enjoy this little bit of optimism, because it's been in short supply.
It's not as if we're rejecting it, Matt. It's not as if you're putting like 6 on the table now and we're going, yeah, boo, sucks. It's not
Current squad with a new centre half, 9th. I think that sounds perfectly reasonable. We're only actually 3 points off 9th at the moment, if you don't count our goal difference, which is somewhat worse than a few teams above us. But anyway.
We're only 2 points off 15th, aren't we?
Yeah, fair point. All right. Keep those predictions coming in. We've got 61 people on Periscope, so we expect, apart from all the sex bots, we expect the rest of you to come up with. Well, they just repeat they just repeat what JR says every 30 seconds, and who wouldn't? Frankly,
I love the idea of a sex bot just repeating JR. I want to.
I think the sex bot's going to be the long-term replacement for Elphick, I think.
The sex bot predicting where City are going to finish and probably being more accurate than the rest of us.
Well,
We're in the FA Cup this weekend. Do you remember when the draw was made while we were doing the podcast, and we could hear not just our three hearts sink, but the heart of every Hull City fan in existence, and probably quite a lot of Millwall fans as well, to be honest, because we were about to play them at the Den in the league that weekend and found that we were actually going to go back again in January. It's on Sunday because it's being shown live in Vietnam or somewhere. And that's I don't know whether it is in the Far East, isn't it? It's somewhere in the Far East.
Vietnam.
Is it in Vietnam? No. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Andrew. Anyway, look. I mean, we ended up in the fifth round of the FA Cup kind of by accident last season, despite being appalling, and then got a severe shoeing by Chelsea in the fifth round. Do we have anything to say about the cup tie this weekend?
No, vanishingly little, to be honest, given that it's the third round of the Football Association Challenge Cup and ordinarily an interesting part of the season. Yeah, what can you say? It's a crap draw for both teams. It is a rubbish draw for them because you can't imagine there'll be more than 4,000 or 5,000 in the ground. I'd be amazed if City take more than a couple of hundred. It's just terrible, and it's one for both teams to get out of the way. And if you're the lucky ones whose reserves win, then you hope for something better in the fourth round.
When you're Nigel Adkins, do you put a strong side out against Millwall because the momentum for the league games is important, or do you take the opportunity to give everybody a rest? Not that you can give everybody a rest because our squad isn't that big, but a substantial.
You me to put myself in.
Nigel Adkins, size 7 brogues. Yes.
Okay. I don't know.
It's probably got bigger feet than that because he was a goalkeeper.
I was thinking about that today because ordinarily in previous seasons we've always said keep the momentum going, keep winning games. We said that when City went on a League Cup run in 16-17, but City had we're in the Premier League. They had a little bit more recourse to having plenty of bodies in the building.
I think you've just quoted 4 or 5 different ex-City managers in one sentence.
Just Warsell's down at the same time. So I'm just a little bit worried about the strength in depth that we don't have. I don't ever want City to lose a game, so I do want City to go to Millwall and win.
Especially as it's Millwall as well.
And I'm not somebody. I hate it when I think it's the attitude of losers when people say, "Yeah, it's good that we got knocked out of the cup because we can concentrate on the league." It's never a good thing when you lose a game. I don't ever want City to lose a game, even if it's the Maluka sausage and onion sachet mixed reserve cup or something. But it doesn't quite feel as imperative to win this year as it has in others, given the current league form.
However, if we assume Matt's sparkling optimism notwithstanding,
not just mine.
Yeah, I know about your ears. I'm thinking on you. If we assume that City aren't going to
partridge in, Matt.
I was defending myself. I'm entitled.
City aren't going to go up or down this season, are they now? You wouldn't think.
Well, I've said 9, so I've said 9, so no is the answer. I just think I'd finish higher than you would.
So does the fact that there's no league imperative now mean that it's easier to put? I'm asking a question, but I don't know the answer. But
the question is what your ambition is for the FA Cup, though. I mean, it's been a long time since a side from a lower tier has got to the final, or even you get the odd one in the odd semi-final when the draw opens up for you.
Millwall, one of the recent ones,
but that was 15 years ago.
Well, I quite happily watch City get.
There's been
in a cup final.
There's been Cardiff since then, so I don't know. We'll see what we'll see what happens on Sunday. And I think it's going to be as much about Nigel Adkins' team selection as Nigel Adkins' attitude to the FA Cup. Because I don't know whether his attitude to the FA Cup was worthy last season, or whether it was just a fluke that we got to the fifth round.
Millwall's attitude matters as well because they're in a proper relegation fight. I mean, we've only just recently stopped being in that dogfight, but they're in a measure of trouble, and I think it's more tempting for them to think that we better put all of our eggs in the basket marked the league. And I can see them making
a wicker basket.
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you? I like a nice wicker basket. I don't like these newfangled plastic baskets, but I think.
Consumer advice from Andrew Dalton.
There's more of that shit where that came from. I think I don't know what squad City are going to put out, because I don't even know if we've got a bloody reserve side anymore. I don't know if we've got the strength and depth to start asking around like
Do you think it's going to do like Doncaster the other season, where the entire team will be made up from like what your favourite phrase, actual children?
That was one of the most fun away games in the history of City, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was brilliant. If City promised to put out a load of children on Sunday, I'll go. But otherwise, no.
All right, so that's this weekend. Sheffield Wednesday's our next league game. They've just appointed Steve Bruce as their manager today, although he won't be in charge until the beginning of February, apparently. He's got Steve Agnew and Steve Clements on board already, and they're going to take charge for the rest of January, and Steve Bruce starts in February. But you can imagine Steve Bruce will be heavily influential on Sheffield Wednesday when they play us in a couple of weeks.
You know, if he joined Wigan or someone, I would wish him well.
He's been there twice already.
I just can't wish any manager of Sheffield Wednesday well, regardless of who it is. You know, if it was an unholy fusion of Phil Brown, Rich Carter, and Steve Bruce, I still don't think I would want that entity to do well.
Okay, thank you, Les.
Doesn't that have interview as a nice winnable game next?
It does indeed. It does indeed. And they've changed managers when they're only in 16th place. I mean, a lot of the teams have changed managers below that, of course, but you know, we haven't. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's something we can tell the rest of football. It is our progress this season after such a shocking start, proof that sometimes having faith in your manager actually works, rather than making that sort of knee-jerk decision that an awful lot of boards of directors do make. And, you know, it's easy to say that given that we were calling for Nigel Adkins, if not necessarily to be sacked, but certainly to be better at his job early this season. But you know, so we can do that wonderful sort of football supporter thing of having the benefit of all the hindsight in existence. But even so, it does prove something, doesn't it, about keeping faith in your manager?
I don't think we kept faith in Adkins. I think we just recognised that there were other more considerable problems at the club. He was never the problem.
Or alternatively, because the man who has to fire Adkins or any manager is Ehab Allam, it's a sign that he wasn't taking a bastard bit of notice of what was going on at the club, and therefore didn't think there was anything amiss with the manager.
Matthew.
I know, I don't like Ehab. You might have noticed. I think we're all in that boat. 10 years ago. God, blimey, we're on pushing for an hour for this podcast, but
stay with us.
Yeah, but you know, it's the first one for 3 weeks, and we've had an awful lot to talk about, and all of it good. But this is where it gets less good, because we've got 2 games from 10 years ago to talk about. Boxing Day 2008, followed by the 30th of December 2008, City's first season in the Premier League, and the slide had begun, somewhat substantially as well. Boxing Day. Final score, Manchester City 5, Hull City 1. Arguably the most memorable game on a national level in Hull City's debut Premier League season, even though we point to things like the win at Arsenal and the win at Tottenham before that. And of course for all the wrong reasons, because if you can find a headline that's got absolutely nothing to do with football, then our tabloid media will find it. And they watched Phil Brown give a team talk on the pitch at half-time and just assumed that he was...
I would argue not the favourite game, but the favourite sort of 15 minutes. And this is something that football's becoming, and there's this sort of like Mourinho manoeuvre of, you know, if a manager does something stupid, you know, at some point during the half-time break or in the post-match, or, you know, chucks some bottles around, kicks a ball boy up at the arse, something like that, then it isn't the actual display that gets talked about. And it has become like a bit of a thing in football, hasn't it? Where, you know, if Jose Mourinho's chucking a load of water bottles around, what you're not asking him about is, well, you've just conceded 3 goals to some shite hawks. And the one thing about this game is I knew the game was 5-1, but I was trying to remember what actually happened in the game. I was trying to remember any of the goals, and there's a lot of games in that first Premier League season where I remember every single thing about the game. And this one I couldn't remember it.
You might have been slaughtered. It was Boxing Day afternoon.
Well, maybe it's just that all of the attention went on Phil Brown.
Well, that's the point I was making. It was a 5-1 game, so an awful lot of football for them to talk about, and they chose not to. And you know, it is obviously unusual for a manager to give a team talk on the pitch in front of the away fans, but it was the perception that Phil Brown was somehow disrespecting his players by doing so.
Phil Brown, I remember saying at the time, felt cheated by his players because he'd given them Christmas Day off. And ordinarily, players would train on Christmas Day, and he gave them all Christmas Day off, and then they turned in an absolute stinker in the first half, and I think there's much better ways to manifest your displeasure than that. The thing that's always irritated me about that, and we're doing it ourselves here, aren't we, talking about that rather than the game, but the thing that's always irritated me is that it was an easy narrative for the national media to hook onto, that that's the moment the slide began. But it really wasn't. I think we just slightly started to get found out a little bit.
We'd lost to Sunderland the week before, really badly.
Yeah. There was always going to be a reversion to the mean, wasn't there? The idea that we were going to finish sixth, which is where we spent a lot of the early part of the season, and that wasn't sustainable at all. We were always going to start creeping down the table. I think what Phil Brown did was probably unwise, although it didn't have the impact that is commonly supposed. But I suppose I get why people think that it's easier than actually doing a little bit of thinking. And that's the headline-driven football industry, and so be it. But
we have an attitude about bringing down people who are either disrupting the status quo, which is what Phil Brown and Hull City were doing throughout that season, and having sort of ideas above their station. I think Phil Brown and City were an easy target because of who they were and what they represented, rather than through the actual action that Phil Brown himself carried out at half-time that afternoon.
Phil Brown was an easy target, though, wasn't he? I mean, he made himself a target with his pink jumper over his shoulders on the telly.
But we hadn't had this from Phil Brown yet. All Phil Brown had been...
It was happening.
It was getting closer. But by Boxing Day 2008, we still had Phil Brown who was giving interviews to the press, but you have to as a Premier League manager.
Yeah.
You have to, and he was being honest, and he was being forthright, and he was being confident, not cocky, but confident. And we were playing well. He was entitled to be like that. Even though we'd lost a couple of games, we were still, by New Year's Day after the Villa game, which we'll talk about in a minute, we were still 8th. Yeah. Nobody had a right to say that City were on the slide on New Year's Day. We'd lost 3 in a row, but we were still 8th in the table.
I do feel, though, that the rot had sunk in before this.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's what irritates me about the focus being on this, is because, as you said, Andy, it's for people who've got no nuance, who can't look beyond the visual and go, hur, 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 it's all going wrong for Hull City because of this. Well, we're already 4-0 down by that point, by the Manchester City of this vintage. Granted, I know Robinho cost more than a platinum bucket of diamonds, but it's not the Manchester City that we see now on Netflix, is it?
Vincent Kompany is still there, of course, but looking down, everyone else has long gone. Was Mark Hughes still manager, or had Mancini arrived by this point?
I can't remember.
I think Mark Hughes was still manager, wasn't he? I mean, I can't remember anything about the game much itself, and I was the driver that day, so if anybody was going to remember it, it was me, because I had to go home with a clear head, and it was one of those days where you really didn't want a clear head. What I do know is that one of the most typically City things about it was, of course, Man City sort of tailed off in the second half, and Craig Fagan scuffed in a consolation with 10 minutes to go, which meant we were momentarily winning the second half 1-0, and then Man City immediately went up the other end and Stephen Ireland scored to make it 5-1. I think actually Phil Brown, or certainly somebody, maybe Brian Horton, maybe one of the senior players, did say, well, we drew the second half 1-1 in a very sort of sarcastic, facetious comedy manner, and somebody took it seriously, which didn't help as well.
The worst thing about that day, apart from giving up our second half lead, was the fact that I had a funny feeling City were going to get a bit of a shoe-in that day, so I backed Man City to win 4-0 at 33-1. So when Craig Fagan scored and ruined my 330 quid on Boxing Day,
He's still local, Craig Fagan. I mean, we can always invite him in so you can tell him off personally.
He can bring me 330 quid if you
want. I mean, City, I remember
it wasn't your £330. It wasn't.
What should have been?
You should have festooned Craig Fagan's actions.
I should have.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, because I've got the image of Phil Brown giving that lecture, the photograph that appeared in all the papers over the next day or two, and then loads and loads of sports columnists making comments about it afterwards. And you can see the players all sort of sat there taking it in. I love this idea that footballers' characters were somehow going to be really, really badly affected by this, and that City played much better in the second half. So one way or another, it worked.
We've got some City fans who claim that City fans are psychologically scarred by hearing "City till we die." A chant which talks about undying love for the team.
Oh, and of course, throwing stress balls onto the pitch last season made City lose a match.
Indeed.
Yeah,
we should talk about the Villa game. I actually remember that game. I remember what happened in the game.
It was the coldest game of the season, I think, was the Villa home game on the night of Tuesday the 30th of December. It was an icy car park. It was a below freezing night. Everybody was in gloves. and it was a tight game, a game of not many chances, and it looked like we were going to stop the rot.
Well, the performance looked like it was going to stop the rot, and the performance itself proved that it was a load of bollocks that Phil Brown's team talk the previous match had destabilised us, because we were pretty good against Villa, weren't we?
And quite feisty as well, wasn't he? I remember when Bambi sort of bundled it in after basically kung fu kicking their goalkeeper until he conceded it. Yeah.
And it's worth remembering that Villa they went fourth after that win, so that was a good side that we'd matched for pretty much the entire match. And we didn't deserve what happened to us, but we'd played well, and if the rot hadn't stopped, it certainly looked as though it had been placed on pause by what was a good performance. Polyfillers. Yeah. No, we were good that night.
Phil Brown made 5 changes, but that can be dictated by the fact that it was 2 games in 4 days, as opposed to City being abject, certainly in the first half against Manchester City. Although Craig Fagan, despite coming on, making an impact, scoring the goal against Man City, still found himself on the bench against Villa and only got a minute at the end. This is where the legend of Kamil Zayati, own goal scorer, began.
Well, he sort of had goals credited to his name, but
he scored one definitely against West Brom.
This was the point where he sort of achieved prolificness, because he wasn't just scoring on goals, he was actually scoring spectacular on goals, wasn't he? This one was like a flying sort of volley. It was almost like the image you see on the front of Panini stickers. It was that kind of motion. Yeah.
So the cross came in. I think it was Agbonlahor who put the cross in, or maybe Agbonlahor was the one trying to get on the end of it. And Zayati, under pressure, diverted the ball past Myhill into the net with 2 minutes to go. The Villa were the last team that we played that season. We played everybody now by this stage, so they were the last sort of unknown quantity for us. And they were top half. They were above us in the table. I think Martin O'Neill was their manager, and they were trying to get European places at the time. How the mighty can fall.
Did they have 2 goalkeepers called Brad that were American? Ridiculous.
They did indeed.
They didn't have another one that was called Trent.
Is that your favourite stereotypical American name? My husband Troy is a good stereotypical American name for me.
Dwight.
Chad.
Dwight Spiegel.
Zach.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry.
What do you recall of the penalty incident that occurred shortly after Villa took the lead?
It was 50-50.
I
don't really care whether it was true or not. It was more the bollocks that followed it, really.
I was outraged. I was convinced it handled it. But having watched a replay of it since then, he didn't, did he? He sort of withdrew his hand and it hit the post.
There were a lot of arguments, though.
From my East Stand vantage point, what about whether it was intention?
Well, no. It was whether the referee was right, because he used pitch-side evidence, didn't he? He didn't just go to the linesman. Didn't he look at something? But whether the referee was right, having given the penalty. Villa players complained for ages. The penalty was given, the ball was on the spot, and then finally Steve Bennett went over to the touchline. Now, whether he spoke to the linesman, fourth official, or looked at something, the point was he came back with a different opinion. Now, he only saw it once. There's no VAR, obviously, or anything like that. But clearly, he was told, he was either told something conclusive or he saw something conclusive that made him think, having made this decision by himself before, that the ball hadn't touched the hand of the defender but had only touched the crossbar. Something happened that wasn't necessarily within the laws of the game, according to some commentators, that made the referee change his mind.
I thought it was the linesman. That's my memory of it, that the linesman was pretty emphatic on it. And if that is the case, then that's absolutely fine. The referee is perfectly entitled. So long as the match doesn't restart, the referee can change his mind on a decision. That's the laws of the game. And I think we were a bit unlucky. We were unlucky that the linesman grassed up City, and we were a bit unlucky.
Well, grassed up. Yeah, no, you're right. Grassed up. It's a weird one because it wasn't a foul on a City player, like a dive or anything like that. It was whether the ball touched a hand or touched the crossbar. Yeah. And of course, it means that City didn't even get a penalty. They didn't even get a bloody goal kick as a result. A corner, as a result, because it was a goal kick.
In a way, it was a bit unlucky because sometimes you get those kind of things. And our performance that night did deserve more than a late defeat, but. Things were starting to go against us that had gone for us earlier in the season.
Okay, so Happy New Year to you once again. We will be back on Monday to talk about the FA Cup, hopefully victory and passage smoothly into the 4th round then. And then next Wednesday, a week today, we will have a special guest sitting at this table with us for our 200th podcast. And it won't be a topical podcast at all, it'll be a historical podcast, similar to the one we did with Brian Hughes.
Henry VIII?
Yeah. And we will have the severed head of Catherine of Aragon. Oh no, he divorced her, didn't he? Anne Boleyn, that'll do. No, we will have a historical figure from Hull City's history, thank you, with us next Wednesday. You have thrown me so much. I had it all planned out. Thanks for that, Les. Point is, 200th podcast a week today, so we'll have somebody from Hull City's past who these two guys like very much. And so do I.